Red severe weather event that day. Another one, we'll jump up to last year, August 8th, Minnetrista up to Plymouth. See all these photographs that are looking out over Lake Minnetonka. You know, you can imagine a nice hot August Saturday afternoon, how busy Lake Minnetonka probably is. And there still were, well, you can see right here, the boats, you know, out on the lake yet when you have a tornado passing right on the north side of Lake Minnetonka. So this was another very well forecast day, but the event kept waiting and waiting. You know, there just wasn't that trigger, a real good strong trigger to make the severe weather happen. So I know several Skywarn organizations, including us at Chanhassen, you know, our operators had been sitting there twiddling our thumbs for about 7 hours, I believe, before the storm actually started to go. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is these storms could be, you know, this could be a waiting period as well. But making sure you got the spotters, you know, communicating with them to know, so they know we're still expecting something, it just hasn't started yet. And of course it did, you know, and it's another one of those worst case type scenarios when you think about you've got a tornado headed into a population center. So luckily there were no, you know, severe injuries or fatalities with this. Did quite a bit of tree damage and some damage to residences, and of course I think the most famous picture of this during the day was the sign for the liquor barn that got blown over. Seemed like that was what all of the news channels led with. And this day, another example, of course, that tornadoes don't hit cities, right?
There's Kramer's house.
Exactly. So, you know, huge myth that's always been out there that, you know, tornadoes don't hit cities. Well, of course they don't hit cities. They only hit Minneapolis and Fort Worth and Miami and Atlanta and Salt Lake City, you know, those types of cities. But here we have, you know, busy rush, you know, busy late morning. Today, this was not supposed to be a tornado day. You know, it wasn't forecast to be a big tornado day. There was a slight risk, you know, in the area. There was a 2% tornado potential. So there was some, you know, thought there that it could be, but, you know, it wasn't, you know, a big day as far as ringing the bell saying spotters be ready to go. And of course you have this, you know, you're northbound on 35W here with that in front of you. Of course, you know, it did damage right into downtown, did damage to the convention center, you know, right over, kind of went basically right over the tunnel, you know, hit the Walker Arts Center, did a little bit of damage out there. Luckily this cherry didn't fall off the spoon, so we're okay there. But still did damage, you know, going right into downtown Minneapolis there. So, you know, another day to think about it, and we didn't have spotters out there. You know, we were a little behind the game, admittedly, on this one. I was out in my car headed downtown to go do something for work when the warning came out, and I called the office, and you know, it rang and rang and rang, and finally somebody answered, and I said, "Need me?" "Yep." "But okay, I guess we're a little busy." So that day was definitely, you know, a learning experience for all of us of saying, need to be able to have the ability, you know, at least think about having that ability to be able to do some snap activations as far as getting things ready to go. But again, you know, taking a look at the radar, you know, and the spotters, the reports coming in, you know, even at this point, reports coming in to the news media, you know, on the radio, TV, everything, and those were, you know, then got forwarded on to Chanhassen to be able to really get a hold of this event. And as you can see, it ended up being, you know, several tornado reports with that day. We ended up having multiple touchdowns all within, you know, those couple hours on a day that was, you know, high 60s, maybe 70 degrees, kind of a rainy, overcast, blah kind of day. But, you know, tornadoes coming right into the heart of the metro.
Well, that was the day too that the radar was showing stuff to the north end of the metro, and that was the area of interest where the reports were coming in from Minneapolis. So it was the spotters actually on the ground that were actually the story that day.
Exactly. Yeah, there again, it's back to the spotters, it's back to, why we're here this evening is really to say, you're absolutely important, very critical, to the warning process, and, hopefully can get as much interest as we can into the spotter classes. So, what about 2010? What about 2010, Mr. Krause?
What about 2010? Well, anyway, as you can see, the statement there talking about only 2-week tornadoes in the Minnesota prior to June 17th, and just a handful of wind and hailstorms. So really, it had been nothing very much. Well, I'll spend the rest of the time showing you June 17th, which was the big tornado day. I brought along a poster after the meeting, if you wish. You can take a look at that and look at some of the diagrams on there, and you're welcome to look at that. Those of you that have this coming Friday evening free, there's the local chapter of the American Meteorological Society is going to be having a retrospective on the science behind June 17th. And that's this Friday at St. Thomas in St. Paul. There is a little thin strip of paper on that table by the brochures. The American Meteorological Society has their website. And if you're interested in hearing more about June 17th, I encourage you to go to that meeting on Friday over in St. Paul. So it should be, I know that there will be a guy coming down from Grand Forks, from Duluth as well. Excuse me. One of the things I'll comment on with the last 3 slides, you saw the Hugo Day, the Minnetrista to Plymouth Day, and then South Minneapolis and other tornadoes. A lot of the ability for weather spotters to go out and make sure that they are watching before the tornado touches down really falls back upon the Weather Service. Normally we're going to have a good idea whether or not there's a chance of tornadoes, and we'll communicate that. But once in a while, like the South Minneapolis tornado day of August 19th, we're going to be caught flat-footed, and that's just unfortunately the way it is. You try to learn as much as you possibly can about how and why tornadoes form, but there's still a large amount of information not known about how and why every single tornado forms. That was just a weird day. John mentioned upper 60s. It wasn't even that. It was like 62 degrees and raining. And then all of a sudden a tornado comes along. Just a weird, weird day to get tornadoes. And so spotters really weren't anticipating much of anything because we, frankly, weren't anticipating all that much. The good news is, however, for the really big and strong and severe tornadoes, the vast, vast majority of the time will have given you information that we're expecting a tornado day, and tornado watch gets issued, and so on and so forth, and then spotters can take it from there. But unfortunately, there's still a small number of tornadoes. August 19th was such a day where we don't have all the answers, and it's weather. There's still an awful lot to be learned about tornadoes. So anyway, there are a few times when that'll happen. When we get caught flat-footed, that results in the spotters not getting on to watch for the storms and getting some of the reports as well. It also results in, from time to time, in nets not being up. I remember one time, I think last summer, when all of a sudden storms, I walk in the door at 8 a.m. and already storm warnings are being issued for the North Metro. And a massive hailstorm went down through, basically from Circle Pines through St. Paul on into Dakota County. And I think that was the day when all of a sudden I wound up getting on 2-1, which is a first for me ever to try to get reports that way. Usually I'm relying on people like John, but we had absolutely nobody else in the office from a volunteer standpoint. So I wound up having to do that as an emergency, and not really knowing in the whole, not really doing a very good job of it either. But once in a while that happens. Well, anyway, having said all that, I want to talk a little June 17th, which was very, very well forecast. Okay, now, we don't have to do this, but if we really wanted to, I could get everybody standing up, chanting, "We're number one! We're number one!" for tornadoes. Which is really, really strange. Minnesota leads the nation in tornadoes this year. Weird. Now, although not so weird, because some years ago, Iowa led the country, Illinois led the country in tornadoes. I think South Dakota did too in 2003,
Yep.
in 2003. So it's not all that unusual for a northern state to lead the nation. And this year, it appears to be us. On that day, the 17th, we had 48 tornadoes in Minnesota, totally obliterating the previous record of 27. And we had 3 of them that were rated a 4, which is the most 4s since the Black Sunday Day of 1967, a day when Albert Lee and Owatonna and Waseca got clobbered. And in the entire region, we had 74 tornadoes on June 17th, which turns out to have been the second largest outbreak in the country during meteorological summer. And to us, we call June, July, August as meteorological summer. So the second biggest outbreak ever in the country. And here are all the tornadoes from North Dakota, and especially concentrated eastern North Dakota. All these little blips from eastern North Dakota, then down to a cluster in southeast Minnesota, around north and west of Albert Lee. And zooming in, here are all the tornadoes in that area around and west of and northeast of Albert Lee. So again, that graphic is on that poster if you're so inclined. But we had 8 tornadoes in Faribault County, 8 tornadoes in Freeborn County, and 5 tornadoes in Steele